Hello listeners and welcome back. Today we're going to be discussing the movie Over the Hedge. Over the Hedge is a DreamWorks animation family comedy released in 2006. We follow a raccoon named RJ who is caught stealing food from a bear. In order for RJ to save his life, the bear gives him a week to return the food. RJ then runs into a group of foragers that he then convinces to help him steal food from the nearby suburb Over the Hedge. I've always enjoyed Over the Hedge as it is a nostalgic kids movie I've watched throughout my childhood, which I'm sure many of you can relate. It's not trying to be anything that it isn't. It knows what it wants to be, a fun family comedy with a humble message. Characters. RJ is the main protagonist and the plot revolves around him, his actions, and how those actions affect others. RJ is a loner. He has only ever been a family of one and has never had to consider anyone but himself. Vern the turtle. Vern is the leader of the family, keeping everyone and everything in check. He does not like when RJ comes and disrupts the balance of his family. He always tries to do the right thing but is only seen as the bad guy. He comes off as cautious, overprotective, and sometimes pushy. Sometimes, however, Vern's love and protectiveness can sometimes get the better of him and he can make mistakes, such as when he calls Hammy stupid. He is, however, willing to own his mistakes. He is willing to accept the fact that he made the mistake and is willing to apologize for it, therefore enabling him as the perfect leader of the family. RJ and Vern share a very interesting relationship throughout the movie, as RJ is always seen as the good guy even though he is the bad guy, and Vern is always seen as the bad guy even though he is the good guy. Now their relationship actually reminds me a lot of Vince and Brian from the first Fast and Furious. If you have not seen the first Fast and Furious, I highly recommend. Even if you only ever just watch the first one and that's it, I can guarantee you will not regret it. It is a classic. Anyway, Brian and RJ are very similar as they have both only come from a family of one. They've never had to care about anyone but themselves. They are only in it for the job. Brian's only infiltrating the family as part of an undercover mission. RJ is only infiltrating the family to collect food for the bear. Neither of their intentions are pure throughout the film. The more time Brian spends with the family, the more he finds himself falling in love with them, which is where his character development comes in as he starts to display guilt and then therefore tries to do something to make up for it and get re-accepted back into the family. The same thing happens with RJ. He starts infiltrating the family for his own agenda to collect food for himself. However, the more time he spends with them, the more he comes to love them and feel guilty about what he's done, which is where his character development comes in, and he then comes back, rights his wrongs, and gets re-accepted back into the family. Vern is a lot like Vince, as he is very cautious and overprotective of his family. This can cause him to come off very aggressive and pushy, even though he is only trying to think of what's best for his family and keep them safe. Every time he is around Brian, he is very aggressive in his face and pushy. He's always accusing him of something. He's always saying that there is something up with him, that he is not telling us something. There are even times that he comes straight out and says it and accuses him that he is an undercover cop. He says that like he is a cop. Yet everyone views him as very mean and aggressive, and yes, he is very mean and aggressive in the way he does it, but at the same time he is right. Everything he says is true. Like, Brian is an undercover cop and he has the right to be very aggressive in the fact because he is an undercover cop infiltrating his family, learning about them, becoming one of them, and he even feels like he is getting replaced in a way because Brian becomes very close with Dom, and Vince and him are like brothers. So not only is he watching someone that he knows is lying and an undercover cop infiltrate his family, he's also having to watch this person take his place, which is very similar to what happened to Vern. RJ comes in as this new exciting person, showing them all these cool new things. Whereas Van comes off as really overprotective and pushy, always telling him that, like, I don't like this guy, there's something up, and he's not telling us something. It was hard for Vern to watch RJ come in and take his place as leader. And just like Vince wasn't fast, Vern was right. Everything that he said about RJ was right. There was another motive to why he was there. He was using them. He was lying. I found the comparison of these four characters very interesting and how they related as they are two completely different characters from two completely different movies, yet they seem to still share the same character development and story. It is also just a very interesting and bold way to structure your characters, having your main character actually be the villain and then have your good character for the movie, the one that is trying to do the right thing, that is in the right, come off as bad. It's a bold way to carry your story between characters, as some people may see the main character's redemption as not enough and can sometimes still view the main character as bad even after they've gone through their development. So it's an interesting way to structure your story, to have your good guy as your bad guy and your bad guy as your good guy. But this movie did it very well, and it all works out in the end. Next, let's talk about our three villains. We'll start with Vincent the Bear, as he's the one that kickstarts our story. Now, we don't see much of Vincent throughout the movie, but what we do know about him is that he is very mean, selfish, and will do whatever it is to get what he wants, even if it means sacrificing and hurting others. RJ gets an insight of Vincent's inner workings when Vincent actually congratulates him for ditching his friends and allowing them to get caught and saving himself. Vincent sees sacrificing others as a noble trait rather than a selfish trait. Next is Gladys, the president of the Homeowners Association Club. Gladys is the president of the neighborhood and overlooks everything that goes on in this new and upcoming neighborhood. She is the one that breaks all of the rules and sets the structure on how the place is run and needs to look. She is very uptight and pushy when it comes to these things, as she is needing everything in a specific way. We experience this firsthand and when we overhear a phone call complaint that she is making to one of the residents in the neighborhood about their grass being 2.5 centimeters instead of the exact 2 centimeters length. It is with examples like these that emphasize how pushy and controlling Gladys really is, and how she will not stand for anything less than what she sets as perfect for her neighborhood. But what truly makes Gladys one of the main villains of the movie is her downright hatred for wild animals. And this is wild animals specifically because she does have a pet cat, Tiger, which we'll come back to later, but she despises anything wild animal. As soon as she sees them, she freaks out and demands that they be killed. This is where our last villain of the movie, Dwayne the Exterminator, comes in. Gladys calls the exterminator to take out the remaining of the wild animals in the neighborhood. Dwayne comes in ready to accept the challenge, as he is very enthusiastic about his job, sometimes maybe even a little too enthusiastic, as he seems to really enjoy the capturing and disposing of wild animals. Dwayne also holds a dark humor about him, as even though some of the one-liners he has in the movie are quite funny, they do come off as more of a dark humor, as they all have a relation to hurting and killing animals. The interesting thing about all of these characters is that they are all villains from the one movie. The movie uses a 3-villain dynamic and crams 3 very different motivated villains into the same film. It is a very unique concept to use, specifically for a kids movie, as you're never wanting it to get too complicated or confusing. This movie played the 3-villain trope very well, as the villains never seemed to clash or feel like they were cluttered into the story. All of their motives were very different. The story was still able to flush out each storyline without it feeling too rushed. Now let's talk about some of the other characters. We'll start with Hammy. Hammy the squirrel is a very energetic, fast-paced bundle of joy with a warm, kind, childlike personality. He is always running around, has a lot of energy, and he can remind you a lot of a kid with his fast-paced spirit and forgetful attitude. Yet Hammy is still a character that holds a lot of emotion and depth to him. Hammy is willing to acknowledge his intelligence and stand up for himself like he does with Vern when he calls him stupid. Hammy is not afraid to show his vulnerability to Vern and express to him how hurt he was by his comment. The vulnerability shown shows a new level of depth for Hammy as a character, as he is willing to acknowledge when things are not okay and need to be addressed in a specific way. And last but certainly not least, how can we forget Hammy's epic slow motion scene? The Porcupine family show a very simple dynamic of a sweet, loving family with 3 young kids and the responsibilities that come along with that. An example of this is when the dad Porcupine offers to watch the kids for the day so the mum can have a day off. A lot of parents with young kids can relate to the Porcupine family, or parents in particular, as they can relate to the responsibilities of having to look after a family and what that dynamic is like. Heather the possum. Heather is your typical teenager with the ability to get easily embarrassed by her parents, such as her dad playing dead all the time. Heather's development as a character starts to grow when she witnesses her dad playing dead for a heist, and she sees the benefits of doing it and how it helps the rest of the family. Later on in the movie, during the last heist, Heather tries playing dead for herself, just as her father, and comes to have a more understanding for it and be more comfortable with it. This then allows her and her father to have a deeper bond and acceptance of one another. Stella the skunk. Stella's character was done really well, as she holds a level of sass but is still funny, and has a diva personality but is still likable. She never becomes overbearing or annoying. Although Stella is sassy and has a diva personality, she still holds a level of vulnerability about herself and being a skunk, and that she is only viewed for her toxic stench. Stella gets a makeover later in the movie, and this is where we get to see her become more outgoing and confident about who she is. But not all of her confidence came from the makeover. Some of it was also thanks to Tiger. Tiger, like I mentioned earlier, is Gladys's pet cat. Tiger comes in at the end of the movie when the animals are completing their last heist. Stella is set with the task in keeping Tiger distracted while the others break into the house and steal the food. While the other animals are completing the heist, Stella and Tiger form an unexpected bond. Tiger holds a very elegant charm about him and finds beauty in Stella. Even later towards the end of the film, when Stella is revealed of being a skunk, Tiger still sees her for who she is and not what she is. It helps even more when it is revealed that Tiger has a nose problem and has not been able to smell anything for years, rendering Stella and Tiger as the perfect couple. This all comes full circle at the end of the movie when Tiger comes to live in the forest with Stella and the rest of the animals. Next, let's talk about food and the human and animals' relationship within the movie. The perspective shown around food in the movie is very interesting, as we are viewing it from the animal's perspective on human society. We are viewing the animal's view on how humans consume food. It's interesting how they point out how much of human society is revolved and influenced around the consumption of food. A few examples would include things such as television shows or commercials. The movie Over the Hedge itself is partly based around food and the perspective of how humans consume this food. It touches on how humans have a overflowing need to constantly have it with us, such as driving the food around in things like ice cream trucks or wearing it for things like mascots. It even touches on how the food we eat can influence our day-to-day lives, with exercise being an example of this. Some people exercise in order to get rid of the food that they have eaten so they can then eat more, whereas others exercise and revolve their food around their health and how they specifically structure their diet to only eat certain foods. It is an interesting perspective to touch on within a kids' movie, especially when a lot of the points that they make are quite valid and true when it comes to humans' consumption involving food. I also like the unique way that the movie establishes the animals and human relationship. Throughout the movie, the humans are always viewed as being greedy and dangerous. This is why the animals don't feel guilty when stealing from them. This level of dominance between the human and animals is further established when we are forced to view the world from the animals' eyes. We are constantly viewing the world from the animals' perspective, so whenever we come across a scene with humans in it, they are always looked down upon. We are seeing them as big, dominant characters where they're always looking down on us as the small, minute one. I think the movie did a very clever job by establishing this method and portraying the clear dominance between animal and human. I'd also like to point out the phrase that RJ uses where enough is never enough when referring to humans, and how this statement is true for humans overall, as we are always looking and striving for new, better and faster way of doing things and living. Yeah, so I think I've touched on just about everything. Like I reiterated earlier, it is simple, fun family comedy for all ages to enjoy, while touching on topics like lying and how it can affect others and the guilt that comes along with that, while also learning to forgive and overcome for these mistakes. It holds a lot of good moments and examples of family and friendship. Overall, it is a good recommendation if you're looking for a simple, fun family comedy. That is all for this episode. As always, everything we discussed will be linked below along with my socials. Please be sure to like, subscribe and follow. Feel free to leave all your thoughts and comments below. Thanks for listening.